Well, hello everybody, and happy trade deadline. I hope you all have had a wonderful day, an absolutely wonderful day. We are obviously going to kick off tonight's stream by talking about trade deadline before getting into, of course, a little bit of franchise mode after that. I talked about for a little bit how my interest in the NHL was dropping for a variety of different reasons. Today was the most interested I was in the NHL all year, which is probably cheating, right? Because, of course, I was interested today. It was trade deadline day. And, you know, granted, okay, we can't go back that far, but like, look at this. Stuff and things happened, and it was beautiful, and I'm going to talk about all of it. Although I don't know if I'll use cap wages. I'll see. I'll double check what old Puckpedia is looking like. Shout out to D-Rex, though, for the 31 months. Today was fun. Today is always fun as a hockey fan, except a couple years ago when, like, no trades happened whatsoever. That wasn't fun. But today was fun, which I am obviously pretty happy about. How could you not be? It's trade deadline day. And I mean, hey, the Boston Bruins actually did something, which is shocking. The Bruins actually did something. We have Taboo as well coming in on the 15 months. Thank you for that. So, hey, let's talk about this nonsense, right? Why don't we? Let's talk about this nonsense. Oh, come on. Can it be easier to filter? Okay, it can be. Oh, there we go. I guess we'll just have to do it that way. I'm going to go team by team because it's often a little bit easier to do, right? And for some teams, there's obviously going to be a little bit more to talk about. For other teams, a little bit less. For example, Anaheim, depending on how far back you want to talk, like trade deadline, didn't do too much. Like if you want to include the Ville Husso deal, which you could. Sorry, give me 1 second. A smidge distracted. How dare I be? Right? I'm the worst. Anyway, Anaheim, they did fine. They did fine. They got a second-round pick for Brian Dumoulin. They got a prospect. They got Oliver Shillington. Like, they did fine. They didn't do any, like, the crazy moves. Like, I think we can officially be like, okay, we're done with the idea of, like, John Gibson's going to get traded. It's been, like, 5 years of that. The man hasn't been traded. Let's just stop with that nonsense. And, of course, Trevor Zegras didn't get traded either. Because there's just no fun. There's no fun to be had, ever. So, there's that. Anaheim, if you go thumbs up, thumbs in the middle, thumbs down, it's a thumbs in the middle towards a thumbs up because, again, you get a second-round pick for Brian Dumoulin, you're doing pretty good. And then there's the Boston Bruins. I love alphabetical order right about now. The Boston Bruins finally did the thing. After a couple of years, and rightfully so, it's not all that long ago, of course, that they set the record for the best regular season team of all time, only to lose in the first round. But it's not all that long ago that they set that record. But for this team, you were talking about a team that just continued to stretch to keep the championship window open. Eventually, that's going to, you're just not going to be able to stretch any further. That's what's happened with the Bruins. They tried with Lindholm. They tried with the Zadorov signings to really make one more strong push. And yes, injuries are a factor in why things haven't gone too well this year. They fired Jim Montgomery and all that nonsense. But the point is they're finally doing now what they need to do, which I am very, very happy about. Or as the song says, fucking loving it. It obviously goes back to the first deal with Edmonton. Trent Frederick, Max Jones, and Peter Hauser to Edmonton. Bruins end up getting Max Vanner, a second and a fourth. That fourth they don't even have anymore, if I'm not mistaken. But, to get a second-round pick for Trent Frederick, I'm good with it. I think, especially when we talk about getting certain prospects for second-round picks, people are going to be like, oh, man, is that good or bad? But Trent Frederick probably wasn't coming back. Max Jones didn't really work out. I mean, he certainly seems to be more of like a very fringe NHLer at this point. But from just a Bruins perspective, second of Forex Max Vanner for that particular deal. Thumbs up on that particular trade. Justin Brazeau, a guy who the Leafs had with the Marlies, didn't sign. The Bruins did sign, and now they've turned that into Marat Kuznetsov, Jakub Lauko, and a 6th-round pick. That's a thumbs-up deal as well, especially if you weren't going to be able to spend or didn't want to spend on keeping Justin Brazeau around. That's a really good deal. I like Marat Kuznetsov a lot. I mean, again, he was an early 2nd-round pick. He's 22. I'm not expecting him to be, this amazing top 6 player, but hey, it's another young guy that you can see what you have there. Charlie Coyle in a 5th for Middlestat, Zellers in a 2nd. It's another thumbs up. I like Charlie Coyle, but let's be honest, he was getting paid too much money. I can't believe they were able to move this deal, given he had 1 year left. I cannot believe they were able to move this particular player. 22 points in 64 games this year. Yeah, he had 60 last year, but just it was the right idea to move on from Charlie Coyle. And the 5th-round pick is what it is. But they got William Zellers, who was a 3rd-round pick, who I'm intrigued to see how he does because he hasn't even gone to college yet. At least they don't have the stats up there for Zellers. But obviously the main piece back is the 2nd-round pick because Casey Middlestat, this is his 3rd NHL team after Buffalo and Colorado. I'm not expecting much out of him as a Bruin. I am a bit worried about the cap hit. I talked about hey, you got rid of the Coyle cap hit, but now they have the Middlestat cap hit. Granted, he is movable. There's no clauses. It's obviously a little bit concerning, but 34 points in 63 games for the Avs this year. He's a different player than Coyle. I'm okay with it. Especially to get a 2nd-round pick in the deal as well is great. We'll skip over this one for the moment. Yoki Haru for a 4th. I mean, I love my Finns, so I'm good with it. Again, he's still 25. You don't quite know what you're going to get out of him. Obviously on Buffalo, the stat line this year, the fact that he's been a plus player. Now, plus minus isn't obviously a great metric, but when it's the Buffalo Sabres and you're a plus 20 over the last 2.5 seasons on Buffalo, I'm not upset that we got you. I'm not upset about it. And by we, I mean me and my best friend, Don Sweeney. And then Mark McLaughlin for Daniel Misule, that is what it is. Obviously, it comes down to what will be viewed as the 2 bigger trades. But just the idea that the Bruins moved on from Trent Frederick, from Justin Brazeau, from Charlie Coyle, from Brandon Carlo going to the Leafs, again, still with some term, which is kind of crazy. And a great deal for the Leafs. I like Carlo a lot, but you can make the argument: has he been struggling? Has it just been the team that's been struggling? Some of the metrics are a little bit lower, but as a pure defensive defenseman, I mean, you can't say that the Leafs don't need a pure defensive defenseman. But again, from just the Bruins' perspective, I love the return: a 1st and a 4th, and Fraser Minton, another former high 2nd-round draft pick. Again, he might not be this elite top 6 point producer, but I love the return. And then there's Brad Marchand to Florida for a conditional 2nd-round pick. I love this return as well. I have been so critical of Don Sweeney over the last couple of years. I'm sorry, he gets an A+ for this trade deadline. He does. If you remove the emotions of it being one of the best Boston Bruins of all time and Brad Marchand being the one dealt, this trade makes all the sense in the world. The Bruins, after all the other moves that they made, are not making the playoffs. And if they do, they're going to get absolutely thrashed. They're very much unlikely to make the playoffs because even if they kept Brad Marchand, he's out for the next 3 to 4 weeks. This move for Florida makes sense because you're getting him for the playoffs. They don't need Brad Marchand in the regular season to make the playoffs. They're going to be fine. For the Bruins, it would have been okay, you keep him to re-sign him, and that is what it is. It was mentioned that they were a little bit apart in terms of likely money as opposed to term. like that whole idea of like, does it suck to know Brad Marchand's gonna wear a different jersey than a Bruins uniform at the NHL level? Like, yeah, of course. But if you're a Boston sports fan, you've seen Tom Brady in a Buccaneers jersey. You've seen Zdeno Chara back in a Sens jersey, or not back in an Islanders jersey. You saw him in a Caps jersey. Like Brad Marchand's the last of that era of Boston sports. So for him to be the last one to go, it sucks, but it doesn't hurt as bad because he's the last kind of departing player in a long line of players. Again, he is currently injured. Like, he's had a good season with the Bruins based on like what defines a good season for the Bruins this year. I'm not at all upset about it being a second round pick, even if it's Florida, which means it could be a late second round pick. But odds are, if Marchand's healthy for the playoffs, that ends up being a first round pick unless the Panthers choke in one of the early rounds. It's a home run for Don Sweeney. I mean, they got a haul of draft picks back for some players where you could afford to make those moves in a seller's market. You got some younger players in the mix, like Fraser Minton. To me, it's a home run. There's not a single move I'm upset about. I'm not upset it's not a guaranteed first and a prospect for Marchand. I think it's fine because, again, he's not going to play for Florida in the regular season until the very end, at best, heading into April. And for the Bruins, like, you look at this page now, and, again, they have some draft picks, which is nice because they had moved future draft picks to try and, make something happen in terms of, extending that window. But, again, they have their first. They have that top 5 protected Leafs pick, this Florida pick that'll likely be an extra first. This is what they so desperately needed to do. You can only stretch so far. Now, they are still in a weird spot. Like, you look at, like, what Elias Lindholm's getting paid, what Casey Middlestad's getting paid, Pavel Saka. You look at what Nikita Zadorov is getting paid, what Andrew Peeke is getting paid, what Jonas Korpisalo's getting paid. And this is an example of Don Sweeney kind of digging himself out of the hole he made for himself. But just basing it off of that alone, it's not that bad. They don't even have the updated roster at this stage. But again, for the Bruins, I'm sorry, it's a thumbs up. Call me biased if you want. I think they did very, very well for themselves given the circumstances, and it's nice to see. Especially, too, you talk about the last time the Bruins started to be bad, they were able to flip the script. You draft David Pastrnak, and all of a sudden, hey, you make a run at the Cup in 2019, lose to St. Louis, and then you get that extra chance as well before losing to Florida in the first round. So, again, I think this deal is fantastic for the Bruins, and I don't really... I understand the negative sentiment. I understand the people that are still just like, nope, fire Don Sweeney. Totally get that. And yeah, there's a chance that Sweeney won't be the guy in charge by the time the draft is there. And I very much agree. There's that idea, too, of like, man, they don't know how to draft, though. Which I totally understand that, too. But... like I said, from the Bruins' perspective, there's no way to view that as a thumbs down deadline. I can't. I just can't view that as a thumbs down deadline, even if you are trading, again, captain of the team. It's a really, really good time for them. But yeah, being worried about Don's drafting totally makes sense. Buffalo, really quickly, because there's 3 trades to talk about. We'll go top to bottom. Yoki Haru for a 4th. I mean, why not? I guess, it's sure, why not? Obey Kubel for Brandstrom. Sure, why not? Obviously, it comes down to this one, and I couldn't believe this, especially because, like, last night, all the talk was JJ Peterka getting dealt. He doesn't get dealt, but they do end up flipping Dylan Cousins for Josh Norris, a divisional trade. I don't know what to make of that. I really don't. They give up Bernard Docker, or Buffalo gets Bernard Docker as well in the deal. They give up a second rounder to do it. as per usual with any trade, time will tell who the winner ultimately is. Time reveals all in terms of trades, but in terms of the whole idea of like, okay, let's shuffle the deck chairs around, like Josh Norris makes essentially $8 million. He's got a no trade clause modified that kicks in after next season. And in terms of the stat line this year, 33 points in 53 games. His biggest issue is he just hasn't been able to stay healthy. Whereas, I don't know, man, for Sabres fans, let me know if you feel differently. But with Dylan Cousins, who's making 7.1, I just feel like, sure, he has had a down year, and that progression's dropped over the last 2 years compared to that 68-point season. It just kind of feels like he's the most recent scapegoat as opposed to being like, okay, internally we're doing things wrong. It's like, no, see, the player's struggling. It's kind of what it feels like. So at face value, it's a thumbs in the middle, maybe trending a bit downward just because time will tell in regards to Cousins and Norris. Not that I would be upset about getting Bernard Docker either. He is a former first-round pick, although, not like he's a big point producer at the NHL level or anything like that. But you could argue it's closer to a thumbs down because it's another trade deadline for the Sabres where it's just like, okay, what are we doing? What direction are we going? And for that reason, you could kind of view it as a negative. Calgary did fuck all. Now, you could say that, well, hey, look at like Frost and Farabee earlier, and that's totally fair. But they haven't done anything. And I don't know if that's a good move or not. Like, granted, Anthony Mantha's on the IR, but, in fairness, they didn't really have too many pieces to move, like Tyson Barrie, Joel Hanley, Dan Vladar. Like, they didn't really have the expiring contracts to move. Maybe there would have been a way to move on from like Blake Coleman or something like that. We saw like Yanni Gourde go back to Tampa. So I don't know. Like for Calgary, initially you see like no movement whatsoever, and they're in a playoff spot or at least right around. No movement whatsoever. Is that a positive or a negative? It was a seller's market this year, so I tend to view it as a negative, but I also can't look at any of these pieces to be like, you could have traded this person. What the hell? Like, especially too, like if you would think now they're absolutely re-signing Rasmus Andersson this summer. He's got 1 year left on his deal, but you would imagine they're announcing an extension because otherwise he could have been one of the key pieces of this deadline. So it's a thumbs in the middle for Calgary as well, because all you can judge them on is their inactivity, but for them, inactivity might have been the best way to go. Carolina. A lot of people have been like, man, being a Bruins fan has to be weird right now. And it is. Come on, a legend of the team and the captain just got traded. But for Carolina and Carolina fans, like, what a weird month and a half it's been, huh? You get the ridiculous Natchez, Rantanen, and other pieces included swap. Can't re-sign Rantanen. Deal him to Dallas, where he immediately signs an extension. I'll talk about that in a bit. For Stankoven, 2 firsts and 2 thirds. By the end of it, did Carolina make out okay in terms of assets? Yes. Like, you end up with a player like Logan Stankoven, you get 2 first-round picks, even if it's from Dallas and they might be later, it's, potentially futures as well to be able to trade at subsequent deadlines. In terms of just, like, pure assets, they did well, but they didn't need assets. They needed key players to push that team over the line to win a Stanley Cup. And is Taylor Hall and Logan Stankoven, while losing or essentially not having Rantanen, Natchez, or Drury, is that moving the needle? I don't think it is. At least not as much as it would have been if they had been able to re-sign Mikko Rantanen. Stankoven's got 29 points this year with Dallas. Like, he's not bad, but I think you have to view it as a thumbs down, thumbs in the middle at best for Carolina, because again, they needed that big-time asset to be able to compete with the likes of Florida, of Tampa, of Toronto, Washington in the Eastern Conference. And their big additions end up being Taylor Hall and Logan Stankoven. Like, it's okay, but the Mikko Rantanen factor of it all, it's like, is it enough? And I have a feeling most people do have that opinion of like, no, it's not enough in this, sense for Carolina. So that's a freaking rough one. Chicago obviously did their big business, being involved in that Taylor Hall trade. They got a 3rd round pick out of that. They deal Seth Jones in a 4th, get a 1st rounder, and Spencer Knight, who's looked really good for them so far. They got Joe Veleno. This was so weird for Detroit, but they get Joe Veleno for Craig Smith and Petr Mrazek. And then the really funny one that Shea Weber boy, let me tell you, Victor Soderstrom and Aku Ratu are also on their way to Chicago for a 5th. It's a thumbs up for Chicago. In terms of the organization, I have my thoughts on them, certainly. But in terms of the business done, Seth Jones clearly wanted out. You get a 1st rounder and maybe your goalie of the future, which I was a little bit surprised by. But when you look at their goalies, the main player people were looking at was Drew Commesso, just about at a 900 save percentage in Rockford. He was at a 906 last year. Like, he hasn't, flourished to the same level as I think Hawks fans are hoping for. He's still young, but the idea of, we can get Spencer Knight, and he's looked really good for us. We can get Joe Veleno, and, again, he's still a younger guy. Maybe that change of scenery will help him end up developing into a decent piece for Chicago. I think it's a really good deadline for them. They get usable players now. They get a 1st round pick back, and the worst that they gave up to get it done was Seth Jones. And they got rid of Petr Mrazek as well, who they weren't going to use, and who's making $4.25 million next year, which goes back to the Anaheim-Detroit trade. Like, Detroit gets rid of Ville Husso for nothing just to bring in Mrazek. But for Chicago, thumbs up for them, man. I think if you're a Hawks fan, you have to be happy. Colorado, it's a thumbs up. I'll tell you right now. Absolutely a thumbs up for the Avalanche over the last little bit. Like, obviously, first and foremost, back at the end of January, Natchez and Drury, they recover well from not working out a deal with Rantanen, which is weird because then he signed for similar terms in Dallas, but Dallas has no state, or Texas has no state income tax compared to Colorado's, so it's weird how that worked out. And then obviously they got to deal with Rantanen being back in the West. But landing Natchez and Drury, not bad at all. Obviously, like, the Lindgren VC pickups were weird. Lindgren wasn't very good for the Rangers this season, but we'll see if he can be better. Getting Brock Nelson is big for them. William Dufour is not too bad either. They give up Callan Ritchie a 1st and a 3rd. We'll talk about it from the Islanders' perspective in a minute. They get Charlie Coyle, which, Charlie Coyle in a reduced role compared to what he was doing for the Bruins, you would think he'd thrive a little bit better in Colorado. And, the typical, built more for the playoffs, like 6'3", 220, all that nonsense. And then they brought back Eric Johnson. It's a thumbs up for the Avalanche. I talked about it last night on stream. The idea that we are thankfully in this time period now where you have teams that say, screw our futures, the picks, the prospects, who cares? We are trying to win a Stanley Cup. Colorado's already done that once back in 2022. They could do it again this year. I don't see how this couldn't be viewed as a thumbs up by anybody. You add Lindgren on defense, Natchez, Drury, Nelson, Coyle. I mean, yeah, you lose Rantanen in the situation, but it's absolutely a thumbs up for Colorado. For old CBJ, it's a thumbs down, man. I want to say it's a thumbs up, but it's not. It's only one metric, but if you've seen the JFresh cards for Luke Kunin, it's not very pretty. They didn't give up much to get him, but it is essentially a bottom 6 edition for the year. He's got 18 points in 63 games on the Sharks, and you can say, oh, it's the Sharks, they're bad. Yeah, but normally in that situation, a player like Luke Kunin starts to thrive a little bit because somebody has to get points on that team. He hasn't. That was more of a Fabian Zetterlund, who, of course, was moved as well. But yeah, for the Blue Jackets, like, I don't know, right? It's the question of, do they think they can make the playoffs? Do you hesitantly add because of that? They elected not to be sellers, where I think if they did decide to sell, you have a couple of pieces there that could have fetched you a decent return. But end of the day, Luke Kunin's just kind of a status quo move. Like, he's not a needle mover for that team. He's not going to make them more likely to make the playoffs. They elected or just couldn't end up moving Provorov. So it just kind of feels like they didn't know what direction they wanted to go, and if they decided that just staying the course was the best way to go, that feels like it's probably a mistake. At least, for this season, I get the idea of they're probably looking at future seasons as the chance to really make something happen. But again, you had pieces, granted, I mean, he's a Columbus guy or an Ohio guy, but like, you could have moved Sean Corrali, you could have moved Provorov and brought in a couple of pieces and then retooled a little bit while holding on to all of your core guys. Just kind of puzzling from a Columbus perspective, so I can't give them a thumbs up for that reason. It's weird. Dallas, massive thumbs up. How could it not be? Granlund, CC, and Mikko Rantanen for Logan Stankoven, 3 firsts, 2 thirds, and a 4th. That is a team that says, we are trying to win the Stanley Cup. And I get the idea of like, well, then why'd you get Cody Ceci if you're trying to win the Stanley Cup? You're not wrong for that sassiness. But that's a team that's trying to win. And then, of course, they re-signed Rantanen pretty much immediately, $12 million, full no movement clause for the full 8-year extension that you can get. So Dallas is absolutely a thumbs up rating in terms of how they did at this deadline. Everyone's looking at them as a potential cup favorite if they can stay healthy. Obviously, like Miro Heiskanen isn't currently fully healthy, but he probably will play in the playoffs because hockey players are psychotic. It's absolutely a thumbs up for them. They gave up a lot to get a lot and to go for the cup. That's what you want. We'll talk about the Leafs here in a minute, but it's that idea of you don't want to be half pregnant. Like, oh, well, we want to win now, but we got to make sure we don't trade picks and prospects in case it doesn't work out. Yeah, those teams don't win the cup. That's just a fact. They do not win the cup. Moves like this make it much more likely that Dallas could win the Stanley Cup as soon as this year. Even if they don't, it's better that they went for it. That's why I'm happy about the Bruins just getting rid of everybody, even Brad Marchand. You have those ideas, right? If you're a contender, you need to be all in to be a true contender. If you're not a playoff team, you might as well commit a little bit more to getting higher picks, to being bad, instead of being one of those middle ground teams that may or may not make the playoffs every year. And if you do make the playoffs, you get bounced in the first round, and then you don't really make that much progress. It's better to not be stuck in this middle ground of, are we really good? Are we really good? We're really bad. That middle ground sucks. You do not want to be there. It's better to be really, really bad than it is to be in the middle tier if you have that chance to take a step up to the top tier. Dallas took a step up to the top tier as if they weren't already there. So, I mean, yeah, no, it's crazy for them. Detroit. Steve Yzerman's going to get fired. It's a massive thumbs down for the Red Wings, from my perspective, on the outside of this situation. I understand the Yzer plan and some of the things, of course, that Steve Yzerman has done well. But they were in a similar situation to Columbus where it's like, okay, what's the best way to go about this? You had some pieces you probably could have stripped away to get some value for, or you could have added to try and give yourself that much better of a chance. They didn't believe they were true contenders, that's fine. But in a seller's market, flip Patrick Kane. Flip Jeff Petrie if you can. Flip fucking Ben Sherrod or Justin Hall if you can. But the thing is, like, it's at the point now for Yzerman where you have Larkin signed, you have Raymond DeBrincat signed, you've signed big free agent contracts. Granted, Kopp's out for the rest of the year, but Kopp, Comfer, gave Sherratt and Hall the deals that they got. He's had time to make an impact on the team, and he's made some positive impacts, certainly, but they still haven't made the playoffs, and they're not more likely today to make the playoffs than they were yesterday, and it just feels like a massive missed opportunity. I mean, again, you get rid of Ville Husso and the $3.6 million deal just to strike a deal to bring in Peter Mrazek, which why? And then Craig Smith for Joe Veleno. Like, Craig Smith's a decent veteran at this point. You got a 4th-round pick for helping facilitate the big Yanni Gourde trade, but yeah, if I'm a Red Wings fan, I am immensely disappointed in the Red Wings and in Steve Yzerman in what just looks to be a massive lack of ambition or indecisiveness. Those are the optics of the situation when I look at it from an outside perspective. I don't know. I'd be massively disappointed if I was a Red Wings fan. So an easy thumbs down there. Edmonton, Trent Frederick, Max Jones, Jake Wallman. It's a thumbs up for Edmonton. Just for Frederick and Wallman alone. Frederick is currently hurt. It's not like this massive thumbs up like we had for Colorado or Dallas, but it is still a thumbs up because they are a better team now with the additions of Wallman and Frederick. Give up a first, a second, Carl Berglund, Max Vanner, and a 4th. Obviously, like Shane LeChance ended up going to New Jersey as well. But it's a team that said, we're still going for the cup. Let's add. Even if it's not Mikko Rantanen or whatever. That extra bit of physicality, that defensive stability, to get it, a Jake Wallman, give up a 1st-round pick to do it. It's a thumbs up for the Oilers. You could argue about, like, okay, well, they certainly weren't going to be sellers. How much more would they have been able to do in terms of a buyer's market? And that's debatable if they should have been in on certain other players. Maybe they were. But, yeah, outside perspective for the Oilers, you get Trent Frederick, you get Jake Wallman. That defense certainly looks a hell of a lot better with Wallman included. You could argue, like, oh, shit, did they need a goalie? That aside, though, I still think it's a good deadline for Edmonton because at least they did something and showed a little bit of ambition. Florida Panthers, massive thumbs up for the defending champions who could be the next Florida team to go back-to-back as Stanley Cup champions. When the podcast was a ongoing thing, especially back when it was Deej and I, we got to talk about and cover the early days of Bill Zito as the GM of this team. And very early on, it was pretty evident, like, this guy has a good idea of what he wants to do with this team. He has a plan, and he's not afraid to make big moves early. And that has only continued throughout his tenure. It's led to 1 Stanley Cup, and again, it could lead to 2. You get rid of a first in Spencer Knight to bring in Seth Jones. Get Vitek Vanacek and Kaapo Kakkonen in his backups. Bring in Nico Sturm, who's a Stanley Cup champion. Bring in a Stanley Cup champion in the form of Brad Marchand. Again, you get Seth Jones to shore up the blue line. Couple of goalies in case something happens with Bobrovsky. Good bottom sixer in Nico Sturm. And you add Brad Marchand, which, yes, it's hilarious. That whole idea of him potentially being on a line with Matthew Tkachuk, with Sam Bennett. Not to mention the fact that they have, a very physical player in the form of someone like H.A. Career. Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous what they have been able to build. It's a massive, massive thumbs up for the Panthers. I don't think anyone would be surprised if they win the whole damn thing this year. Los Angeles. Let me just look at the Kings. Thumbs down, right? I mean, you're talking about a team that's currently in a playoff spot, and your only ad is Andrei Kuzmenko. I don't see how this could be viewed as anything else other than a thumbs down for the Kings. In terms of that Western Conference arms race, mentioned Colorado, mentioned Edmonton, mentioned Dallas already. Your only addition is Andrei Kuzmenko, who will be playing on his third team this year. He had 5 points in 7 games with Philly, but is that enough of a needle mover to push this team into true contention? No, at least compared to what other teams were doing. You still have all 3 of your first round picks. This feels like a team that is half pregnant and says, well, we want to win, but we don't want to risk too much of our future. You're not going to win that way. At least this year. Maybe next year is the year they decide to really go for it, but they're not going to do anything this year unless they just go on a magical run, and some of the other teams don't live up to their full potential. That's just a fact. And again, it's another one of those teams that could have sold off a couple of parts. All the talk about Brant Clark, he doesn't get moved. There was some talk about Quentin Byfield, he doesn't get moved. Again, it's just that indecision, and even more than a Columbus or Detroit, because of the current standing of the Kings, it has to be viewed as a disappointment of just like, really, you didn't take this opportunity to really try to push and go for it. So maybe that happens next year, but it just feels like a missed opportunity for the Kings. I don't think anybody can, have them in that, like cup contender status. Like they're in that tier of like, yeah, I mean, they have a solid roster. They could do something, but I don't think anyone's viewing them except for maybe Crash Andrews as like, oh my God, yeah, this team's absolutely going to do something. Minnesota. Some thumbs in the middle towards thumbs up. I mean, probably more thumbs in the middle. Like Gustav Nyquist for a second is pretty pricey. Like Brad Marchand went for a second. Different circumstances, though. Justin Brazeau. It's a decently costly price, and then they let go of Reese Johnson for nothing. It's a thumbs in the middle at best. Again, they get some forward help, which is nice. Is it enough to kind of keep them in that top tier? Like I'd put them between your Colorados and Dallases and Los Angeles. Like they showed more ambition than the Kings. It still doesn't feel like it's going to be enough to propel them to really being a major threat this season. Who knows? Again, playoffs are crazy. You never quite know. But it definitely feels like they're a second tier contender at best. It probably is more of a thumbs in the middle. Like, again, Gustav Nyquist is 35 at this point. Like, he's not what he used to be. Brazeau's a solid bottom sixer. But again, Colorado adds who they add. Freaking Dallas gets goddamn Mikko Rantanen. It's crazy. So, yeah, I don't view it as a massive win for Minnesota, but it's not a loss. Montreal did nothing aside from re-sign Jake Evans. That's got to be a thumbs down. Again, a seller's market where someone like Gustav Nyquist is fetching a second-round pick. You mean to tell me you couldn't get anything for Christian Dvorak, for Yoel Armia, Pezzetta if you decided you didn't want to keep him, David Savard, and those are just the UFAs. Let alone if they had decided to move someone, I mean, granted, like Kirby Dach's constantly injured at this point, the poor guy, but someone like Mike Matheson, who has a year left on his deal, that didn't stop teams from approaching certain players. It's got to be a thumbs down for the Habs. Seller's market, you didn't do anything. They didn't buy, which is fair, because they're not in a position to buy. They're not near, step away from contender status. But to not sell at a seller's deadline is just kind of crazy to me. Again, they have decent amount of draft picks already, but you add a couple more in for a Dvorak, and Armia, and a David Savard. I don't know. I'd be disappointed as a Habs fan. I couldn't really view it any other way. Nashville. Sure. Like with Nashville, it's just one of those things, right? Where their plan heading into the season just very much backfired and did not work. Getting a second-round pick for Gustav Nyquist is great. Trading Novak and Shen for Bunting and a fourth is kind of strange. They get a fifth-rounder for Jankowski. It's a thumbs in the middle. The head-scratching kind of Penguins trade aside, like a second-round pick for Nyquist pretty much means you can't label this as a bad deadline for them. They didn't really have too many UFAs that probably would have been able to fetch too much, right? Like Anthony Angelo, Jakob Vrana, Kiefer Bellows, Andreas Englund. They didn't have too many pieces. They would have had to have moved someone like Justin Barron, who they didn't even have to pay that much to get. Again, like what could like Colton Sissons have gotten them? So it's a thumbs in the middle. You can make an argument to be closer to a positive or a negative window. It's okay, but Nashville is just in such a weird spot for as bad of a season as they've had. It's funny though, because I mean, look at the draft picks that they have. Just in the first 2 rounds over the next 3 years, you know? So they're still in a decent spot, but it is true they probably could have sold a little bit more. So thumbs in the middle, but again, you can make the argument about what side it would have been on. Nashville done New Jersey, I should say. Sorry, I didn't even know about the Daniel Sprong trade. It just caught me off guard. It was really easy today to miss trades that went through. Obviously involved in the deal that nets them Shane LeChance, which, 6th round pick, but from a college perspective, 27 points in his first season at Boston University is a big dude. Like, you never know what he might be. Giving up a second, though, and Herman Traff for Brian Dumoulin, probably more of a thumbs down. Beckman for Cholowski. They get Daniel Sprong, Mark McLaughlin, and then give up a third to get Cody Glass. No disrespect to John Gruden. I feel like it has to be a thumbs down. Like, I get the idea that Jack Hughes got hurt, but I feel like it has to be a thumbs down because I get the idea of adding, but is Brian Dumoulin, Cody Glass, and then potentially Daniel Sprong coming off an AHL hat trick, is that enough this year to really keep them in contention? Probably not. Especially when you're talking about Jack Hughes being out. Siegenthaler, I believe, was going to be out until the end of the regular season. It just doesn't feel like they did enough to stay competitive. And you could argue, maybe they do still have enough, but waving the white flag, selling in a seller's market when Jack Hughes gets hurt, getting something for Tatar, Lazar, not giving up that pick for Brian Dumoulin. If I'm a Devils fan, I would have been happier with that approach as opposed to what they did. So my perspective, if I view this as I'm a fan of this team, am I happy with what they did? If I'm a Devils fan, I'm not happy at all. And I saw Henrique say as much as a Devils fan in terms of just kind of the puzzling moves. The New York Islander give up Brock Nelson and William Dufour for Callum Ritchie, a first, a third, and Shillington, who they just flipped the Ducks for nothing. And then Cholowski for Beckman, I should say. For Adam Bettman, Gary's nephew. Look, Callum Ritchie and a first for Brock Nelson makes it a home run anyway, and they still get a third on top of that. Callum Ritchie was a late first rounder in 2023 in terms of what he's done junior this year, 67 points in 41 games for Oshawa. It's absolutely a win. Brock Nelson's played over 900 some odd games or whatever. 901. There you go. With the Islanders. He is a solid player, but to get a first round pick back, to get someone like Callum Ritchie back, it's essentially 2 first round picks for Brock Nelson. Great business. Thumbs up for Lou. If you're an Islanders fan, though, could you maybe argue it's more of a thumbs in the middle? I think you could make that argument. Kyle Palmieri, you could have gotten something for Kyle Palmieri easily. Could you have moved on from Pageau or Anders Lee? Maybe a little bit more difficult, but you certainly could have. There were rumors about them trading Noah Dobson. That didn't end up happening. So they're going to have to work on re-signing him. But they did have a couple of extra pieces that they probably could have flipped. But especially with Matt Barzal being hurt and everything, this wasn't going to be their year anyway. So it's another team where I think it is a thumbs up. But you can make the argument that they could have sold even more. So if you wanted to have it as a thumbs up, thumbs in the middle, somewhere in between, I'd get it. I do still think it's a thumbs up, though, because that word came out that, no, we're not trading Brock Nelson, which seemed like the most Lou thing ever, that he got mad that people were saying he was going to trade him. So he's like, no, I'm not. How dare you? Because Lou Lamoriello. But, oh boy, the New York Rangers. Ryan Lindgren, Jimmy Vesey, and Hank Kempf to Colorado for Juuso Parssinen, Calvin Hahn a second and a fourth. It's okay. I mean, picks are nice. Juuso Parssinen's still a younger guy at this point. Lindgren wasn't really working out. It's okay. Riley Smith for Brendan Brisson in the third. Good trade. Good trade. You know, you get a former first-round pick in Brisson. Granted, you know, he's 23 at this point. He's probably not going to be what a lot of people want a first-round pick to be, but it's a younger guy. But then giving up a third for Carson Soucy is weird. It's like we're selling, but we're still going to want to replace Lindgren with Soucy. So essentially you traded Riley Smith and a third for Brisson and Soucy. Like, it's interesting. I'm not surprised the Rangers are trying to stay in that competitive state, though. In terms of pieces to deal away, they really didn't have too many. At least ones that would have been easier based on the salary, but in terms of like expiring deals, they didn't have anybody too crazy. Could have looked at giving up some of the younger guys and some more draft picks to really go for it. I think the Rangers are also kind of in that second tier of like Minnesota, where it's like, okay, they addressed some things, but isn't enough to put the Rangers back into that top tier of contender status. I don't think it is. Yes, they don't have their first this year. They don't have their own second for the next 3 years. But it feels like with the market that was out there, $13 million in deadline day cap space, that they could have done more to add, but kind of got scared based on the struggles earlier on in the season. So if I'm a Rangers fan, it's probably a thumbs in the middle. But at the same time, maybe drifting towards a thumbs down, you know? Because it's weird. They did a bit of both. They bought a bit, they sold a bit. So maybe it does equal out to a thumbs in the middle. It's just been such a freaking weird season for the Rangers, obviously. The Ottawa Senators. 2 deals. We talked about the Norris-Cousins swap. We'll see if it works out for the Sens. That's pretty much my thought there as well. Like, we just don't know. But the trade with the Sharks, sending Ostapchuk, Gregor, and a second to San Jose for Zetterlund, Robbins, and a fourth. Fabian Zetterlund's a really good pickup. Again, I kind of mentioned like he is doing what Luke Kunin was unable to do, and still putting up points for that team. He's really good defensively. And Tristan Robbins, 23-year-old player who quite knows there, but he and Ostapchuk kind of equal out. I mean, Ostapchuk's a little bit younger. Basically a second-round pick and Noah Gregor for Zetterlund in the fourth. It's not bad. It does kind of, again, raise the question, though, of like, okay, should they have maybe looked to sell a few more pieces, try to deal Claude Giroux if he was willing to waive the clause? You're always looking at the UFAs, and even some of the other guys that have a little bit more term. David Perron, for example. Obviously, if they make the playoffs, they're not going to be viewed as favorites by any means. So would it have been better to sell a bit, and then if you still make the playoffs anyway, be like, oh, okay, cool. I don't know. Now that I talk myself through it, I think I'd be a little bit disappointed as a Sens fan, but a couple of the UFAs that you would have liked to have seen moved had no movement clauses, so I don't know. Maybe there have been reports that just certain guys didn't want to go. I'd probably put it as a thumbs in the middle. Like they did get better in theory. Obviously, the Norris and Cousins thing is just kind of is what it is. The Flyers flipping Andrei Kuzmenko to LA along with a seventh for a third. It's not bad. Getting Nikita Grabenkin and a first rounder for Scott Lawton, a fourth and a sixth. Good deal for them. And then Giovanni Smith for Eric Johnson. I like Giovanni Smith, but he's bottom sixer. Primarily, it comes down to moving Kuzmenko, moving Lawton, getting back a prospect and a couple of picks. It's good for Philly. It's thumbs in the middle at worst. You could even argue a thumbs up type of deal for them. Mainly comes down to, again, could they have found a way to move someone like Risto? Would that have been too much? Like, could they have picked apart a couple more pieces? Maybe. But in a general sense, if I'm a Flyers fan, I'm pretty happy with that. I mean, look at that. 7 picks in the first 2 rounds of this year's draft, depending on how certain conditions play out. I mean, that's good. Philly's doing things the right way, even if Lawton's been a good player for them. And again, getting someone like Nikita Grabenkin, he was a 5th-round pick, but in terms of his production, he came over 41 points in 67 games in the KHL. Didn't do much with the Leafs at the main roster level, but is doing really well at the AHL level. So, and apparently is really good friends with a certain Matvei Michkov. So you have Dallas, who's like the home of the Finns in the NHL. Maybe Philly will be the home of the Russians in the NHL with Grabenkin and Michkov leading the way. So that's a thumbs up for Philly. Maybe more of a thumbs to the Northeast. We'll see. Penguins, Pittsburgh. They made quite a few deals. Got a 5th-round pick for Vinny Desharnais. Good deal. Flipped Michael Bunting in a 4th for Novak and Schenn. Not a bad deal. Got a 2nd-round pick for Anthony Beauvillier. Good deal. Flipped Luke Schenn for a 2nd and a 4th from Winnipeg. Great deal. Moved a 5th to get Connor Dewar and Connor Timmins. Good deal. Flipped Cody Glass and John Gruden for Chase Stillman in a 3rd. Good deal. Kyle Dubas will be memed because, the former Leafs connection. But if I'm a Penguins fan, I am incredibly happy about this. They brought in a haul of draft picks, which is what they needed to do. And you see, they still had some picks that were dealt, of course, some more recently, others not so much. Look at the picks that they have now over the next 3 years in the first 3 rounds. It's another team where you could make the argument of, could they have stripped away a few more pieces, like a Matt Grzelcyk or somebody like that? Maybe. Obviously, anybody with a little bit more contract term, they might not want to strip away because they're still going to try to win. But in terms of what they need to do with this deadline, they're not a playoff team. I thought Kyle Dubas did a phenomenal job from the outside perspective for Pittsburgh. Not too much really to talk about. It's just a good set of deals. For the Sharks, I've been talking with Sin a lot. CYN FTW Productions on the YouTube side of things, of course. Support my boy. There's the argument of, did they strip down too much? I don't really believe in that. Because you can always bring in players of the equivalent of who they dealt away in free agency. They dealt Vitek Vanacek, got back Patrick Giles. Why not? They picked up Vinny Desharnais for a 5th. That one I don't necessarily agree with. Like, I guess the idea is like, well, we need an NHL defenseman, but so far you're drifting towards thumbs down. Got a 4th-round pick for Nico Sturm. You're kind of moving back up. Jake Wallman, who you got for free, 1st-round pick for him. You're in thumbs-up territory. Luke Kunin, you got a 4th-round pick for him. You're still in thumbs-up territory. The Zetterlund one, I know a lot of people are like, man, that's probably a guy that you should have kept. We'll see. I don't entirely disagree with that. The extra pick is nice. If someone wanted to put the Sharks at thumbs in the middle, I would understand. The reason why I would be thumbs in the middle as a Sharks fan is the Zetterlund trade and giving up a pick for Vinny Desharnais, who you just did not need to give up a pick for. I'm sorry you didn't. But, a 1st, a 2nd, move on from Wallman. The only real pieces they stripped away that were actually decent were Wallman and Zetterlund. Can you replace Wallman and Zetterlund in free agency? Yes. So, probably somewhere between thumbs up and thumbs in the middle. You look at the draft picks that they have in the first 2 rounds over the next 2 years, or over the next 3 years, which is hilarious, especially over the next 2 years. You could make an argument. Was there a few more pieces you might have been able to get something for? Maybe. Probably not. Like Mario Ferraro's name was out there. They probably could have stripped it down a little bit more. Yes, there is the idea of eventually you have to stop stripping down pieces and actually just try to go for it. I don't think the Sharks have reached that yet, where you now say, okay, no more stripping away pieces. Now is the time where we build. They are still, for the most part, in teardown mode. Macklin Celebrini, Will Smith, William Eklund, it's a great start on the offensive side of things. They do still need to figure out the pieces on the defensive side and in goal. Obviously, in goal, they got a Scaroff, which is great. But the defensive side, like you have Sam Dickinson, Luca Cagnoni, but they are missing, and maybe some people would say Sam Dickinson is that like true number one defenseman. But for example, if you're the Sharks, you know the right time to say, okay, time to start building it up is if you landed DuPont. If I'm a Sharks fan, that is where I'm like, okay, whether or not we get him or not, that's around the time after that draft is when we say, okay, let's start trying to push and make those improvements. Until then, keep stripping down. Get what you can. Get what prospects you can. I get it's kind of the same thing in Chicago. They're like, oh my God, how bad can you be? Like William Eklund's already 22 and Macklin, he's going to suffer for so long. Like, well, yeah, typically at the start, you got to suffer for a while before the team that drafted you very high up, in the case of Celebrini, first overall, before that team eventually turns the corner. But I think for the Sharks right now, it is all eyes on trying to get Landon DuPont and whoever else they can get in between. And then if you have a core, and I know this is kind of fantasy booking, but if you have a core of Celebrini, of Smith, of Eklund, Dickinson, DuPont, Askarov in goal, you're looking pretty good. Looking pretty good at that point. So, decent for the Sharks. The Seattle Kraken. I'm so bummed they're not Vegas when it looked like they were going to be. In terms of what they accomplished, though, at this deadline, it's absolutely a thumbs up. Getting a draft pick for Daniel Sprong, even if it's a 7th, is a thumbs up because he wasn't working out there. Getting a 2nd for Brandon Tanev, massive thumbs up. Moving Yanni Gourde, Oliver Bjorkstrand, and a 5th, and getting Michael Eyssimont 2 firsts and a 2nd, massive thumbs up. Absolutely massive. Just a great job by Seattle. Again, the extra draft picks, of course, that they have. There is the argument again, could they have torn it down just a little bit more? Could they have gotten something for Tolvanen, for Jordan Eberle, Jaden Schwartz, Jamie Oleksiak? Maybe. But it's obvious like they're gonna need a little bit more work before they can kind of get back towards like, okay, let's push to really be a strong playoff team and then trying to get up to that contender status. So it is a thumbs up for Seattle. Maybe thumbs in the middle, somewhere in between, just because they could have done a little bit more. St. Louis, speaking of could have done a little bit more, massive thumbs down for the St. Louis Blues. Absolutely massive. Just like Calgary, they did nothing in a seller's market. A team that already, look at how many of their picks they do not have. I mean, look, they don't have their own 2nd round pick until 2028. There's no reason why you could not, and maybe they did. We don't know for sure, right? We're not in the fucking room with them. But you couldn't get anything for Radek Faksa? Really? Nobody inquired about Matthew Joseph. Nobody inquired about Oscar Sundqvist. Alexei Toropchenko. Nobody inquired about Nick Leddy or Cam Fowler. Nobody inquired about Ryan Suter. These are pieces that might not have fetched you an elite prospect or a 1st round pick, but it could have gotten you something to help out with a little bit of extra draft capital that they really need, because the Blues, for my money, are not 1 piece away or even 2 pieces away from being in contention. They're certainly not a piece or 2 away from being a Dallas or a Colorado. I don't think they're a piece or 2 away from being Minnesota or even Los Angeles. So the fact that they didn't tear down in a seller's market to get whatever they could, and again, tear down doesn't mean you get rid of frickin' Jordan Kyrou and Robert Thomas, but Radek Faksa, dude, 7th, get anything for him. Get literally anything for him. It doesn't matter. I get it, it's not a video game, it's real life, and things are a little bit different. But you trade Radek Faksa, you call up fucking Dylan Peterson. I don't fucking know. Just somebody. Throw a body up there because you're not a playoff team. It's a massive thumbs down for the Blues. I'd be furious if I was a fan of that particular team. The Tampa Bay Lightning only made 1 move, but it's the move that you want to see. Yanni Gourde and Oliver Bjorkstrand brought in. They give up picks to get it done. It's a thumbs up for Tampa. The thing is, like, I think they're a little bit better of a team still at this point than they thought. I feel like they are where the Bruins were a couple years ago, probably in a slightly better spot, in all honesty. But they are where the Bruins have been before of, okay, are they what they used to be? And then they find a way to hang around. They are in that stretching phase that the Bruins hit the end of before the ligaments finally tore. It's not that time yet for Tampa, so it makes sense to be like, yeah, fuck it, let's go for it. This is what the top teams do, man. They go for it. And again, it's not like they were going to be sellers. You add Yanni Gourde back, his deal's up at the end of the year. So why not? Why not? Especially if you're going to try to keep pace with the beasts of the East. It absolutely made all the sense in the world for the Lightning as they try to win their freaking fourth cup in franchise history. And if right now, on deadline day, although I think now we're into March 8th, if you were to tell me the Tampa Bay Lightning win the Stanley Cup this year, I'm not going to be surprised. Not going to be surprised at all. So it's absolutely a thumbs up for the Lightning. It's absolutely a thumbs up for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Brad, in the words of Steve Dangle, Brad did it. He actually added to this team so that they can try to keep pace as being the favorites out of the East. You give up Grebenkin and a first to get Scott Lawton. You move Dewar and Timmins for cap purposes. You give up Fraser Minton in a first, but you bring in Brandon Carlo. Let's be honest. Right now, what do the Leafs need? Minton, 2 first, and Nikita Grebenkin? Or do they need Brandon Carlo and Scott Lawton? It's obviously the latter. And again, they have Carlo for 2 more years after this at $3.5 million, which is a great deal for him. This is absolutely what the Leafs needed to do. Give up those picks and push. You're dealing with the Florida teams. You're dealing with some other pretty strong teams in the East. This is what they absolutely had to do. It does not matter if Mitch Marner leaves and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, we lost in the first round. I wish we still had Fraser Minton in the first. Fuck that. It is better to go for it. It is better to have loved and lost than to not loved at all. Hockey terms, it is better to have traded your picks and tried to win than to have never tried to actually win at all. It's a thumbs up for the Leafs. Has to be. Absolutely has to be. I'd be pumped if I was a Leafs fan. Obviously, you're a little bit frustrated to see what some of the other teams in the East added, but the good thing is they at least tried to stand tall with those other teams. Utah. Got to be a thumbs down, man. 5th round pick for Weber, Soderstrom, Ratu. Like, I get whether, because we got to talk about a lot over the years, right, of the Coyotes, the path that they were on. Now you talk about Utah, a lot of the younger pieces. Obviously, you're not in a situation where you're going to trade like Clayton Keller or somebody like that. And maybe if Nick Bjugstad was healthy, they'd be able to have traded him, although it says his return's going to be next week. So, could they have stripped down a couple of extra pieces? Yeah. Gotten a couple of extra things here and there. Probably would have been helpful. But obviously they weren't in a situation where it's like, nope, blow it up. And they do still have a lot of prospects in the system, obviously. But, I think certain Utah fans would have been probably a little bit more positive coming out of this. If, it's like, just find a move. But instead, they just seem to be like, nope, we're securing the future because they re-signed Kerfoot. Obviously, Gunther already signed. They re-signed Ian Cole and Olli Mata. So, Vejmelka as well. So, I'd probably have it as a thumbs in the middle, maybe between that and a thumbs down. Again, just feels like, maybe a little bit more that they could have done, but honestly not much with the way the roster's constructed. Vancouver Canucks, thumbs down, right? I mean, you got a 3rd round pick for Carson Soucy. That's fine. But this is a team that is not at that level of top contender. I don't even know if they're in that middle contender anymore of like a Minnesota, Los Angeles type of level. They might even be a step down from that. This season's obviously been a bit of a disaster in terms of the JT Miller trade. Brock Besser was just thrown under the bus in terms of essentially, it being at their media call afterwards of like, oh man, like we essentially got offered scrap for him is how people were reading into it. Like you always kind of talk about like the culture of teams, and that gets memed because typically it's memeing teams for not having a good culture surrounding their team, but just seems like something's rotten in Vancouver, doesn't it? Like JT Miller didn't work out. They haven't re-signed Pettersson, Besser, but they didn't move him. Pettersson's been struggling immensely to the point where they were listing on offers. What are they? What are they at this point? And again, it was a seller's market. Could have tried, and apparently they did try to move Pia Suter, but could you deal Teddy Bluger and get away with it? Of course you could. Could you have tried to have moved Derek Forbort for something? Yeah. I mean, again, it's one of those situations. They didn't make any of the big moves. Made the JT Miller move earlier, but they didn't make any of the other big moves they could have made. They didn't really sell outside of Carson Soucy. I feel bad for Canucks fans because it looked like they were turning the corner, and now they're kind of right back in a state of disarray, and that blows. Unless you are not a fan of the Vancouver Canucks, in which case that's awesome, but it's a thumbs in the middle at best for Vancouver. Vegas. Only adding Riley Smith for Brisson in a third. I think it's got to be thumbs in the middle at best. They obviously weren't going to sell. They didn't have too many assets to move at this point to really try to make that big splash. But the fact of the matter is they were outshone by Colorado. Dallas certainly one-upped them. Getting Riley Smith back isn't bad, but what they did is not enough compared to what some of the other top teams were able to do. And obviously Vegas isn't, to my knowledge, quite in the standings as to where they'd prefer to be. So I think thumbs in the middle at best, maybe even trending downwards just because, again, of what other teams were able to do. Again, Riley Smith isn't bad, but it's just not a ton. The Capitals only added Anthony Beauvillier. There was more talk about Washington than any other team that I saw in terms of not wanting to disrupt the kind of mojo that the core had. So getting Beauvillier, not bad. They weren't going to be sellers. They did have the extra assets to go for it. If I'm a Caps fan, obviously I'm overjoyed with how the season's gone because I don't think anybody expected them to do this well. I don't think anybody expected Ovi, especially breaking his fucking leg earlier in the season. Is he going to mention it? He alluded towards it, at least. There is an argument of not messing with the mojo of a team, but this is very likely Washington's last shot at a cup. Maybe they have another run next year, but you would think like this is probably their best chance at a cup for the foreseeable future. So for that reason, if I'm a Caps fan, I'm a little bit disappointed. Like, again, there is an argument in regards to like the mojo of a team, but are you going to regret not going all in? When you still have all three of your first round picks, especially the 2025 first rounder. Like, they're going to be a playoff team. What the hell do you need that for? But again, their arguments keep the mojo together. So, I mean, I don't know. It's thumbs in the middle at best. I do think they could have gone for it, but I'm intrigued to how Caps fans feel about that. And then the Jets, the Chris Driedger swap, Luke Shen for a second and a fourth, Brandon Tanev for a second. It's a thumbs up to thumbs in the middle. I think, again, like, it's not bad. They did add, but you look at those other big teams in the West that added more than they did. They still have all three of their first round picks as well. What the hell do you need with that 2025 pick? So I'd probably trend more towards thumbs in the middle. They did add. They did make the team better, but it does feel like they could have done more, right? It really does feel like they could have done more in terms of adding and really trying to go for it. Especially too, like Nick Ehlers' deal is up at the end of the year. Iafalo's deal is up at the end of the year. Velarde's an RFA. Like, you know, you kind of want to go for it at that point. So it's thumbs in the middle at best for the Jets. But I don't know. I'm intrigued to read people's responses. Those are just one man's takes in regards to the deadline. But it was a really fun day. It was a really, really fun day. I did miss a couple of resubs, by the way. Atomic on the 21 months. All my Sabres do is piss me off. Your take if you watch the Cena turn. I didn't, but I saw it because it was everywhere. Cool that they finally did it. It's not enough to have me interested in watching them, but in my mind, John Cena turned heel many, many years ago when he stole the title away from Rey Mysterio. And then MK came in on the 22 months. Jay Marty as well. I don't know if I missed that one from an hour ago. But yeah, trade deadline. Fun stuff, as always, honestly. And keep an eye out. It should be out soonish. We're probably going to have a transactional roster update on the Xbox side of things. The Fast C Tactics 2G roster as well. And I'll probably have to start up a franchise mode with those rosters. Probably. But MLB is also coming out really soon, too. So we'll see what happens with that.